Welcome to the SprocketPod, your podcast for helpful HubSpot content. I'm Cameron Collins, and alongside my co-host Mark Lerner, we sit down each week with experts on the HubSpot CRM to break down cool builds and unique apps that will make your instance better. Whether you're a new admin or you're a business owner looking to get the most out of HubSpot, our conversations are going to provide you with unique insights that you can apply. Don't forget, we host the SprocketPod live on LinkedIn every week, and you can catch all of our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. Let's dive into today's episode and get you working smarter with HubSpot.
Yo.
Welcome indeed to the SprocketPod. For those of you who are listening, Mark and I do this every single week as a way to help those who are HubSpot superfans and HubSpot users. We cover all different topics to help you be better with HubSpot. This week, we do have our guest, Shadab, joining us. Shadab, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Shadab and I work very closely together at Rev Partners. And Shadab, I'd love for you to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, so I am a senior product manager during the day and a strategist at night. So my role is like really complex. I sometimes hate it. It's like too complex. So basically what Cameron does, I do that, but in a limited capacity. And then rest of my time is, to help ramp up our strategist team, build knowledge, build scalable solutions that we can, execute tailored to very specific business needs of our partners. So I build all those best practices, training, and things related to that. And whenever I have free time, I just post stuff on LinkedIn. So yeah.
And you post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. You've gained a following for having not only the HubSpot tips that you post regularly, but I know that you have an affinity for putting the Dragon Ball Z characters and anime characters. Was there an inspiration behind that, or is that just a love for anime?
Yeah, it's just trying to have fun while posting something helpful. Like it's just to when something like gets me really excited, I post like anime that resonates with that excitement, or if something is like sort of humorous, then I add in like a sticker with a emoji that resonates with that. So that sort of thing.
I love it. I mean, you have again a pretty large following on LinkedIn, and it's because you do post not just fun content, but also content that is legitimately helpful. And speaking of helpful content, today we're going to be talking about a quarterly business review. I think it is arguably one of the most important meetings that a company can hold in a given quarter. And we're going to break down what is the purpose of a QBR. We're also going to be talking about a QBR from an ops perspective. So how do we run them? What does it look like to deliver that type of data? And then at Rev Partners, at least, we hold what is called a product roadmap review for some people instead of a QBR. So Shadab and I will be getting into that and breaking down what the difference between a QBR and a PRR is and when to use one or the other. But Shadab, I want to open it to you. What is the purpose of a QBR?
Yeah, so QBR is a fun topic. One of the things I'll tell you like a quick story. I've seen a person, I won't name anyone. There is this trend posting about X is dead, dash dead is like dead. So cold calls are dead, they are, but outbound is dead. So one guy posted like QBRs are dead. I was like, I saw all of the reasonings. So, and I sort of sympathize with that, because a lot of companies, when they think about QBRs, they think very specific to like a department, or and as you grow and scale and you become this sort of like a giant machine enterprise, then QBRs are very political. So nothing basically gets done, and everyone's trying to, hey, marketing is like, hey, we got this many MQ, sales is like, we got this many influence revenue and whatnot. So it becomes a lot of conflated. uh in my opinion, the very like a very simple and fundamental definition for a QBR from an ops point of view is how, like, what questions do I need to answer. Let's come up with those set of questions, and let's try to sit on a round table and try to answer those with data. So that's basically it, like in a nutshell. You have your data, you have your questions, and you try to find answers to those questions. That's it.
I personally think of a QBR like an earnings call.
Hmm.
And if you're a large company, you're IPO'd and you're publicly displaying those earnings call, that's very much one thing. I'm curious, Mark, if you've spoken with people about running QBRs or holding what is effectively an earnings call, and some of the takes that you may have seen for people who even hold these types of meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think your notion is kind of an ideal one, but often not in practice. I think in practice, often people feel as a QBR is, for right or wrong, like kind of need to justify their, their role, like show, show what they did this quarter. And I think it causes a lot of stress for a lot of people. Um, but I think for me, what the most useful aspect of a QBR is to see the things that you may not have seen before. So, even in an ops role where you have a more holistic view, you're still not seeing necessarily everything. And when you're in a QBR, you kind of get to see your picture, but you also see everyone's picture.
Mhm.
And when you're able to do that, things start clicking and you can see, oh, there's an opportunity here and there. So, on the one hand, it often is stressful, and you're trying to make your slides look as nice as possible and emphasize the stuff that went well and kind of de-emphasize the stuff that may not have. Um, but on the other hand, if you really kind of pay attention, you're able to see, opportunities that you may not have seen before, regardless of your role, rev ops, sales, marketing, whatever. Um, if you have a mind that mind does this sometimes, is just kind of looks for puzzles and like how do you put pieces together, and where the and if you do that, QBR is a really good place to find it. So
Yeah, good pointer. Nice.
You mentioned using a QBR almost to justify your job, and in a way, I think that's right. But I think it's a good thing in the sense that if you are able to deliver a good QBR, then it helps you to be more secure and stable. Whereas on the flip side, if you are very uncomfortable with what was or wasn't delivered this last quarter, it can make for a very difficult conversation at the end of the quarter. And obviously, different companies are going to have different priorities with different timelines. But Shadab, when it comes to running a good QBR, you mentioned having data and using that to drive decisions. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what type of data is typically covered in a QBR and what type of outputs you tend to have coming away from it.
Yeah, fundamentally, I have ran QBRs across like different company sizes with like teams of, you know, just 20 people to up to teams of, 300, 500, maybe even 1,000 people. And it depends on like the scale that scale you're operating at. Uh, Basically, in my opinion, when you're looking at the data point, the fundamental thing that you will have to start with goal, which is a big caveat. Like it comes with a big caveat, because in a lot of situation, I know you also know this. When we are talking to strategists, and we're like, hey, what's your revenue goal? What's your partner's revenue goal? They're like, we don't know. So ideally, we wanna start with a revenue goal that, based on whatever, whoever is the business owner or whatever is the board, or depending on the scale again, they might have some figure in their mind. So we start with that revenue goal, and then we try to break it down fundamentally, across your entire bow tie model. If you're unaware about like what bow tie model is, just look at winning by design, you'll get like full picture. But you think about, hey, we have like a 1 million ARR goal this year, 2025. Okay, how do we get that? How many qualified deals do I need to get in order to get to this particular goal? Okay, so you capture that. Okay, in order to generate X amount of qualified deals, how many net new leads do I need, and how many old leads do I need to nurture to in order to generate those qualified opportunities? So you reverse engineer and then go all the way back to how do I get these people to learn about my business in the first place. So you sort of start at your end state, basically what is your like desired end state or future state. Okay, once this QBR is done, we want to be at this place and we want to have answers to these questions. And that's where you start to break it down. So if you have a revenue goal, well and good, you look at your data either from like various sources, ideally a CRM. If you are using spreadsheets, god forbid, but if you are using it, just use that for your QBR. But whatever CRM you're using, HubSpot, Salesforce, Pipedrive, Dynamics, if you hate yourself, just in case. So, so yeah. And then you just break it down, count of deals, count of MQLs, SQLs, conversion rates between those, and there's like a lot of factors. So don't get overwhelmed. Start with like a very fundamental metric and then start to break it down, and then you'll be able to see like the bigger picture. I have done QBRs where we were able to basically partition the revenue by use case. So it was a SaaS company, and we were able to partition the revenue by, hey, our platform is mostly used for the highest revenue generator are internal interviews, some kind of executive interviews that people are doing internally in their organization. That is interesting. Okay, next is a podcast. People are like, so revenue segmented by a use case, revenue segmented by territory. So you can do a lot of different segmentations once you get the infrastructure set up. But that's coming for later on. I'm getting ahead of myself.
This definitely ties back into the conversations that we've had around data maturity models, because fundamentally, if there's nowhere else to start, what you want to do is pick the highest level of your revenue goal without any partitions, without any what we would call volume metrics, and start by trying to answer, can we achieve that? So if you don't know what your lead to MQL to SQL conversion rate is, and you're not sure if life cycle stages even work, you just start by saying, well, how much revenue did we earn? And did that go according to goal and plan?
Yep.
And if you can or can't answer that, then that's where you start getting into the territory of more fundamental questions that need to be answered. But Shadab, clearly having good data makes for a good QBR. Goes without saying that bad data makes for a bad QBR. But what makes for delivering a bad QBR?
Delivering a bad QBR is basically you don't have an end state in mind, and you have a lot of good data. Let's say, for example, I have seen like I've watched a lot of call recordings here at RP and in my previous org, and I won't take names, but I've seen like some bad QBRs. So basically, there is a pattern, and nothing to say about the person. It's like a training mechanism. You have to go through that. You fail at that, and then you get feedback. In our culture, feedback is a gift. You improve upon that. So uh, fundamentally, you don't have a clear end state. That's the sort of a, if you have a north star for a success, then you have a south star basically for failure. Definitely, if you don't have a clear end state, what I mean by that in a simple terms, when this QBR ends, what needs to happen? If you are able to clearly answer and articulate that answer, then you're good. If you don't, then your QBR will be all over the place. You'll be talking about your MQLs, you'll be talking about your conversion metrics, you'll be talking about your time metrics, you'll be talking about all of the different things, but you won't be able to tie it all together and get to like a certain end goal. The goal of the QBR has to be like fundamentally simple. Like hey, people, or hey, board members or whoever are there, like, hey, leadership team, like, we had X amount of data, X, Y, and Z. These data, these data points told us this particular story. Based on that, we recommend following 5 action, and here's the priority, and here's why. And that's what we are going to do next quarter. Do we align on this? Yes, no. If no, then why not? So that's how you basically structure it. If you don't structure it in a certain way with a clear end state, that's a recipe for failure.
Mm. And what is failure like? What does failure look like? What's the like? What is a bad QBR?
You ended the QBR and no one knows what do we need to do next.
Yeah.
Okay, we saw a lot of data points. Nice. It was all cool graph with good colors. I like to build a lot of good reports with like really nice coloring. I go into that rabbit hole, which
Yes.
is a bad practice. But you did all
Yeah.
of that. You built a really pretty presentation, and you did a fantastic job at all of that. But at the end, once that is done, because QBR, you don't do QBR just for the sake of doing QBR, right? So you did the QBR and nothing happened. Like, you didn't drive any actions, you didn't drive any decisions out of it. So for example, if I ran a QBR and I'm like, look, our team, based on the performance we have seen, we have 20 people in our uh, SDR team. And just this is just a hypothetical like scenario, no hate on SDR teams, just purely hypothetical. So 20 people in SDR team, and still the inbound to outbound revenue ratio is like mind-boggling. Only 10% of our revenue is coming from outbound. Something is definitely wrong. Either training or our like outbound play, our tech stack, something is wrong. And then we talk about that and do something about that. But if we just did that and nothing happened, then it's like a total failure.
Mm.
I think it really speaks into two interesting concepts. One is the difference between just pure data analysis and true revenue operations. Because clearly showing up to a QBR, speaking to all of your data points and saying, well, this is what this is what the data is, that's not important enough. What you really need is to say, this is what the data means. This is the story that your data is telling. And that, I think, plays into the second concept, which is that of revenue operations versus go to market operations, which is, I think, a burgeoning role. I'm curious because I know when we did this the first time around with Allbound, that was a very new or burgeoning theme at the time. Shadab, do you have any opinions on go to market ops versus rev
Mm.
ops?
Yeah, it's a it's a controversial question. So I'll give you like a real life example. So one of the interesting. So I work with this like fitness based company right now. They are my only customer as of now. Previously, it was a large SaaS company. Now they are like a large fitness company, 1,000+ employees, something like that. And we have this Epic going on. Epic is basically a project, but it's like agile, so it has a fancy name. Just deal
Mm.
with it. uh, okay, so we have this Epic going on, and it's about finding out low hanging fruits in the CRM. The ultimate goal is to generate more revenue for the business, but we have to like take a step by step. And now when I'm like looking at different customer segments, so one of the segment I'm working with is people who had a deal with us at some point, but it ended up in closed lost with very specific reasons, not because like reason like they are purely bad contact and they just ended up badly. They had a genuine interest at some point, but because of pricing or because of some competition or some legitimate closed loss reason. And now I'm like thinking, okay, I have all of this in place, I have sent all of my analysis, observations, and everything. But I'm also suggesting, hey, we can do these kind of nurture campaigns. But even though I want to do it, but I cannot. So that's like a barrier. But I'm like, hey, we have a growth marketing team that can help you with all of these tactics that I've mentioned. But again, take it from a grain of salt, because I'm in the pure revenue operations and not in the go to market ops as of now. So it's like a sort of a symbiotic relationship. These two will go hand in hand, and should be going hand in hand, in my opinion. But yeah, there can be other thoughts on that.
Mark, have you had any conversations around go-to-market ops yet, or is this still
No,
very,
I mean I've heard
very
it
new for everyone?
talked about, but given that RevOps itself is often kind of translated differently by different people, I haven't really heard a fundamental difference between two. It sounds like just kind of a new name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the engagement that I have is basically, I work at like purely operational level. I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to communicate with my customers. That means I'm not talking to the ICP of my customer, or the current customer base of my customer, but the other team, the growth marketing team, does that. So they are manipulating landing pages, they are checking the copy, doing the analysis, which one resonates with people. They are like writing actual emails, marketing emails, to see which one has a better click through. So although it dials down into marketing operations, but it's like more than that, because once you start this thing going on, then you have to bring in sales and get them to convert. So it's like a complicated domain. But yeah, I agree with Mark. It's like RevOps is defined by every other company very very differently.
Yeah. It kind of feels like people might be trying to stick new names on existing things. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
To be
just
decided.
grab, yeah, just grab a thing and then slap operations at the end, and you're good.
Exactly.
Yeah. We'll see how this episode ages 12 months from now. If go-to-market ops is a true new role that we're seeing people are hiring for, or if it's just same thing with a new name. I
I've
want to take
already
it though. Go ahead.
yeah, I've already seen people with actual title like go to market operations leader. Like I've
Hmm.
seen that on LinkedIn. I don't know how real is that? Is that actual their job title, or they are just it's for LinkedIn for marketing and engagement purposes? I don't know, but I have seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to really break down the thoughts behind that, because I'm curious if people have clear differentiators between revenue operations and go-to-market operations. I mean, I know that we're seeing a lot of people that are saying they're go-to-market experts and go-to-market leaders. And I mean, regardless of how being a go-to-market leader is defined, I think that the key thing here, though, is if we take it back to the notion of a QBR, you mentioned having that clear end state. And so, whether you're in rev ops, go to market ops, sales ops, marketing ops, success ops, it is so important to make sure that when you go into the end of the quarter and you're delivering that QBR, you have that end state in mind, because ultimately that's what's going to inform changes for the following quarter for what epics or projects you're working on. So, in other words, if you are not delivering a QBR and you're just telling your boss or your executive team, I think we should revamp life cycle stages, that is not enough. You need to have the data that says this is what I'm going to do and why,
Mm,
and here's how it affects the CRM.
yep.
And so, Shadab, I know that you and I, being at Rev Partners, we're obviously RevOps driven, RevOps minded. I've consistently held the opinion that HubSpot admin should be versed in RevOps. Do you see a QBR as a helpful resource for someone who is not necessarily in a strictly RevOps role?
You mean like a sort of admin where they just take orders and they're like, hey, we want 5 properties created with 25 different values, and this workflow needs to be created to automate X, Y, and Z, just like a pure admin role.
Yeah, if someone's in a more admin role, do you think that there's benefit or value to potentially using a QBR to highlight, here's what I did over the last quarter, and here are some initiatives that I'd suggest over the next quarter?
It depends. Just like you said, we have something called as product roadmap reviews. So if your organization is at a point where you have some data, like your instance is at least a little bit mature, that you can talk about things, that you can talk about your basic volume metrics, conversion metrics, time metrics. If you have that, then definitely worth giving a shot. And basically, it's not my words, it's like my almost all of my customers were like, it helps us take a step back. It helps you zoom out and see the bigger picture on what's going on. So the short answer is yes. But if you don't have the data, then run a roadmap review. Say, hey, we finished X, Y, and Z. The impact was we have unlocked X, Y, and Z visibility. And based on that, you guys can make some informed decisions, hopefully. And then because of this, I recommend doing these 5 items moving forward for the next quarter. So that's how I would structure if you don't have any data points to talk about.
So, in explicit terms, what is the difference between a QBR and a PRR?
So basically, QBR is actual, like you will have a very in-depth detailed section on your business performance. It will talk about your revenue goals, it will talk about the goals versus actuals, breakdown of your revenue, breakdown of your conversion metrics by teams, by individual sales rep, by territory, by various different things, you whatever you have. And then a conclusion of that, and that is going to power up your next steps, your next items in your roadmap. For audience is basically the list of things that you need to launch in your CRM. A PRR, on the other hand, because you don't have any rich data to tell story, you will share what was done, so that you don't get fired. You can tell, hey, I did X, Y, and Z, and it had this many workflows and this many properties and this many configurations and this many forms, whatever how much in depth you want to go, you do it. Like, it depends on how your organization is structured. And then you share the impact of that, not necessarily from a data point of view, but from a architecture point of view. We have unlocked these kinds of reporting. Once the data starts coming in, data will start producing in, we will see these reports. And then based on that, here are my next steps. So fundamentally, the main differentiator is the business performance aspect. You don't have that in PRRs, product roadmap reviews.
And that's, I think, an important distinction, because whereas a QBR is driven by data to achieve whatever end state you are delivering, the PRR, the product roadmap review, is effectively driven by the lack of data. And so the goal is then to say, here's what we don't know, but here's what I did. Here's what I would like to be able to learn and achieve. And here's what we could do next quarter to better the data coming into HubSpot.
Yep. Not just HubSpot. I mean, if you're using some other CRM, doesn't matter. Uh, and if you really hate yourself, you're using Dynamics, just like I said before. You can do that in any of the CRMs. You just need to know how to do it.
So you mentioned not just being a strategist, but being a product manager. What does it mean to have a product mindset when we think about revenue operations?
So I don't know if guys have seen this a certification on Academy. It's called Growth Driven Design. There's like, I think, one or two certifications with that same name. So they HubSpot really pioneered this term with websites. They took the like concept of websites, and sorry, they took the concept of software development and pushed it into websites. So basically, your business is not a stagnant thing, like it's not a static thing. It's like a dynamic, living and breathing thing, and it's going to change and evolve. So because your business evolves, you need to constantly be managing and iterating and improving and refining your website. That same thing is like, we bring it back to the CRM point of view. We don't believe in like CRM implementation that take 12 to 18 months when you like start. I don't know if you guys have seen those contracts. If you like buy Salesforce and you're working with like a Salesforce solution partner, and they'll give you like a 18 months timeline to just to from buying to getting your first initial users starting using the CRM. That's like a CRM implementation mindset that comes in, both legacy systems, even older than that, like Oracle and Sun systems and whatever. So you do that, and then once you start, then like they're like, okay, it's 18 month now, and we have changed a lot of things in our business. So now let's do another re-implementation. So that's like a thing. So a product mindset is something like, you think about a MVP, you think about like a minimum viable products. What do we need immediately to get our teams on board, not in like 2 years, but in like weeks to months, depending on the complexity, of course. Weeks to months, how do we get them on board and start this quick feedback loop, like a close feedback loop, collecting all of those feedback. Hey, this is broken, I hate it, this is awesome, let's double down on this. So you rinse, repeat, and be really really agile on that. So that's like a CRM is a product, and we don't call them implementations, we call them like product launches. So within CRM, okay, you want to track your conversion metrics, let's launch life cycle stages. Okay, you want to run really really darn good sales operations, let's launch sales stages. You want to run your support system, ticketing system, or onboarding system, let's launch customer service or customer support, and any of the playbooks or solutions that we can employ in that and launch in that. So let's launch these things, and we don't stop. So once you have launched lifecycle stages, 6 months from now, we'll check back with you. Hey, in your business, does an MQL still mean the same thing? Like a form submission and a webinar attendee, or do you have anything? They were like, oh yeah, we started offline events and we consider them marketing qualified because our marketing qualifies those people during those offline. Okay, let's integrate that in your lifecycle stages. So that's how we think about that. I know I rambled a lot, but that's in a nutshell.
Well, what I'm really hearing is that having a product mindset means that there's really no end to any change in the CRM. If you launch life cycle stages, you're coming back to it in 6, 12, 18 months to revisit and reiterate on it. It also means accelerating the time to delivery to make sure that we're not waiting until life cycle stages is in its ideal state to do anything. We're going to build, release, iterate, evolve.
Yep. And the last piece of the puzzle is adoption. So if you are launching a product, if you're launching a feature release, or anything you're rolling out in your CRM. So for example, you launched a pre-sales qualification process using lead object, the newly launched lead object. You launched that. Just an example. That goes with like every single thing that you launch. You have to ensure that it's getting adopted forever, like literally forever, like until you die, basically.
Well, that's if you think about any product, an example that would come to mind is your phone. There really are not major changes in any year over year release, mostly speaking, but there are some changes. And if the product team said, well, the phone isn't really changing, we're just going to give it a new name, which I think people might argue that that's what's happening. But if the product team just said, well, we're not going to make any changes, then no one would ever buy a new phone. And so the same thing applies to your CRM. When we think about iterating the CRM, you have to revisit all of the things you do forever to make sure that it's always growing. And that's why there really is no end to your engagement or to a HubSpot admin's job or to what the RevOps person is doing, because you should always be iterating.
Yeah. And just like your business is growing, which should grow, like, right? That's why you are in the business in the first place. So does your CRM, because it has to support your like infrastructure of your business. So it's gonna keep evolving. If you stop, then it's gonna break really really fast. Like I cannot emphasize this enough. It's gonna break really fast, extremely fast, if you don't keep up with that.
I'm going to throw out a curveball here just because it's a podcast since 2024. What do you
Uh-huh.
think about using AI for QBR planning and
Uh,
yeah.
I love AI just is so awesome, and it can be super dumb if you don't use it correctly. I love it. So I don't know about like other folks. Here's how I use it for specifically for QBR planning.
Yeah.
I analyze all of the data. I make it AI friendly, so AI can digest it and actually see what I see from a data point of view. Because if you don't provide the right inputs, it's gonna look at like a weird, very weird things. So if you provide like a chart or something, it's gonna throw off. So better provide like a table format, ideally a CSV or maybe even a screenshot. Make sure that's in a table format because it's easier on the OCR that AI uses to scan that. So I'll provide it, and then I'll share. First, I will ask, what do you see, and how do you look at that? First, I'll get like fully unbiased opinions on that because I don't want to contaminate that with my thoughts. And then I'm like, hey, I have these opinions. I want you to disagree with this and critique this and find as many loopholes as you want. And it does. Like I have like trained it so it's like a sort of a roast personality. So I want you to make fun of and insult me about all of these analysis I've done and give, and it does like a really really nice job, and that helps me figure out, okay, I've missed this point. Okay, stakeholders might have this concern, I haven't addressed this. Okay, these might be the questions that people will ask, and I don't have an answer now, so let's go back to the drawing board and redo this again. So I do it. I love AI specifically for this particular use case. That's
Yeah.
my use.
Yeah, I think that it's an underappreciated resource for data analysis because there's a lot of concerns about hallucinations, which is true, and important to, like you said, not bias it, because if you kind of seed, if you lead, if your questions are leading, I feel like it's more likely to do that because it wants to please you. But I've been using, I've been analyzing data for not a QBR, but like a report. Um, and it's been amazing. So it's like, I pulled huge data set from Power BI, loaded it up in a CSV, both Claude and ChatGPT,
Hmm.
and when you just see it start like pulling in a Python library and then generating a interactive chart, you're just like, wow, this is the future.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah.
Is there one GPT that's better than the others for the analysis of data?
I got so I have come I've come around lately to be thinking that Claude is, or Anthropic is more effective from a, when it comes to like anything having to do with code, and because the analysis is done with Python, um, Claude is the way to go. I feel like I'm interacting with two very different entities now when I
Mm.
work with them too. It's pretty weird.
I like how you call them entities.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I'm not gonna anthropomorphize yet, but they have different, you know, whatever the equivalent of personality is, different training. They
Mhm.
interact with you differently. They have different biases. That Claude does feel more, at least I guess in the way I interact, more inclined to um, reinforce my own biases without, so like if I lead with a, hey, analyze this data and look for this outcome, it's going to find, I feel like it's more likely that, but that just may be my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about Claude specifically, but GPT, in my opinion, is also like very similar to what you said. If you're not clever about what, like how you want it to operate, so it's gonna try to please you. So I do the opposite. I try to reverse engineer. I was like, hey, find faults, make fun of me, like make fun of the stuff that I've shared with you. Like find as many loopholes as you can. The more you find, you win, and it's
Well,
gonna find like gold within those things that you might have not think through like during your first analysis, which is pretty helpful in my opinion.
for sure. It's interesting because that model of being critical, there are there are styles or formats in which you get the AI to be self-critical, and its outcomes are much better. That's what kind of the not O1, O1, yeah, what the O1 model is. It's basically in the background, kind of doing this planning and self-critical chain of thought, is I think it's called. And the outcomes are kind of like statistically much better for whatever reasons. It's interesting.
True.
I'm curious. So when it comes to preparing for a QBR, this brings up a really interesting point where AI can be a massively helpful tool. What are some of the ways, including AI, that you prepare, Shadab, for either a QBR or a PRR?
So I haven't had a luxury to run any PRR at my career. Every single customers I've received, they have been like extremely complex for some reason. Sometimes I wish I had simple ones, but yeah, I digress. So for QBRs, I always try to start with a clear end state, and I was like, okay, when this QBR is done, I need to have a set of priorities that is gonna impact the business performance of my customer positively. So that's like the end goal. And then I start with like the top metrics. So whatever is that, so is it like revenue, is it deals closed won to deals created ratio, like the pure win rate, or whatever. And then I start breaking it down. Once I'm done breaking it down, everything on the deal object, like as many partitions I can, then I stop and then take a step back, do the analysis, and then I do it separately on contact level or company level, depending on what industry. So current customer is on B2C, so they don't have company, but previous one was B2B, so they had company object. So I had to do both contact and company. So do that, and then do sort of a connection between these two. Okay, this is where contacts and deals connect, and this is where I can see the object switching happening. So I do all of that, build the reports, tell the story, and then yeah, have like my key takeaways, any missing gaps. I tend to point out all of the missing gaps as well. Okay, meeting outcomes. So meeting outcomes is like a notorious thing in specifically in HubSpot. No one wants to fill it, but it's like a really really valuable data point. So like, okay, these many meetings have no values. Hey, stakeholder, can you look at your team? Why are they not filling their meeting outcomes? How can we help on that? So that's like another portion of that. And then I try to make it like a cohesive story. So start with the top metric, break it down, and then jump back, and then break it down. So it's like like our CEO calls it pyramid principle. So you start with top level, you deep dive, and then you jump back up. So it's like a pyramid thing going on. So yeah, that's how I approach it. You want anything specific?
No, I mean, I think that's a really good overview. And for those who might not be super familiar with the QBR, we've mentioned it a few times in this episode and on the show in general, really leaning into winning by design with the bow tie model. Huge way for us to structure our QBR. But even when we look beyond looking at volume metrics, conversion rates, velocity of, again, each of the various metrics in your CRM, I think that one of the most important takeaways today is really making sure that you start with that end state in mind, because that's what drives the output of the QBR being the input going into the next quarter.
Yeah, I'll give an example to support that. So when we did the team level analysis in one of the QBRs, I think two QBRs ago. So we did like a team level analysis and see, hey, this is the deal volume that's coming in, and these are the conversion rate between. So I had to build like a data set because HubSpot only allows you like a very basic funnel. So I built a data set with operations of enterprise, and then we saw, okay, there are some teams who have like a higher conversion percentage. So we had this hunch, uh, do they respond to their leads faster or no? That was one of the line items for the next quarter. So we built out an infrastructure to calculate and capture what is the time to respond. So once you get a lead as a salesperson, how much time do you need to respond to it? And now that is actually a part of that report. So we are able to see, okay, this particular club or this particular location has a higher time to respond, which is, I think, not a good thing, and this one is lower, and we can see the impact down the line in the funnel. This is not just one metric, but there are other metrics, but this is one that we can focus on and improve and talk about people.
Running a QBR is a complex meeting to hold. You're covering a lot of data. You're working to get the buy-in of the leadership or executive team with whatever end state you have in mind. And again, if we idealize what an earnings call or what a QBR might look like, you can look at an earnings call for a large company. Again, that's sort of an idealized version of a QBR. But what are some of the things that drive like a good session, right? You're covering data, you have a presentation. Are there any keys that you look for when you're interacting with the executives? Like, do you just expect them to agree with the data and then give you a thumbs up on your end state? Or how do you handle like pushback, and what are some of the things to expect like during the QBR?
Okay, so this has this large it depends answer, but the way I approach personally is I try to involve the stakeholders in the conversation. So I'm like, okay, team, I see this particular club has a highest task completion rate, but they are not converting as much as deals, versus this particular club which has very very garbage task completion rate, and they are actually on paper at least performing high. What insights do you guys have internally, like on ground? What do you know that I don't know? So they share some really really good insights, so I personally try to involve them. But yeah, the ultimate goal is, once we are done through all of these, what steps can I take as your consultant, as your strategist, and what steps you can take? You can think about, hey, we have to meet X, Y, and Z people for these things to get to these outcomes. Do we have a certain list of tasks or action items generated after the end of QBR that is ultimately going to roll up and support our business and help us grow as a company? Do we have that? Yes, no. If yes, then it's a good QBR. If no, then it was not so good.
I like that. My hot take question as we wrap up here: who does RevOps report to?
Bum bum bum.
Oh yeah, I love that. So the RevOps radicals would say, hey, we want to report to CEOs directly, or maybe even board. I don't know, but it. I think it has. It's a difficult question. It depends on how your organization is structured. Do you have different VPs reporting to a single go-to-market leader? If the answer is yes, then RevOps should report to that particular leader directly, bypassing these VPs. Because if a single VP of a department has you under your reporting, then all of your stuff that you're doing is gonna be very department oriented, and you don't want that kind of RevOps team. RevOps team has to be like really agile, sort of like a SEAL Team 6, and they operate really really fast, and basically get stuff done. So they report to that particular leader if you have that. If you don't, then ideally some kind of neutral leadership that ultimately reports to the CEO, not directly to CEO, but a neutral leadership that is not influenced by a very specific department, be it engineering, be it sales, be it marketing, be it customer success, support, partnerships, whatever. You have all of these. So not a very specific department, but some like a neutral leader, maybe a COO or a chief of staff or something like that. That's my opinion.
Mark, do you have any thoughts, or have you heard a strong opinion in the community?
I've this is an ongoing conversation. I've been around a lot. I am, you put 5 different people in a room, you get 6 opinions on this. But I think, like Shadab said, it's very much dependent on the structure of a company. I think in an ideal world, it would be the CRO if there is one.
Yep.
That the reason for that is that I see, again, ideally, and it often doesn't play out this way in practice, because I think all too often a CRO title is just put on a VP of sales as a way of making it, but it's not. The concept of a CRO, having a CRO sits on top of the entire revenue organization, is the same concept that brought about revenue operations as being not sales operating, but sitting on top of the entire revenue organization. Therefore, it should report up to the CRO. Often that doesn't happen because there's no CRO, because the CRO is really just the head of sales, or like the chief operating officer. That would probably be the two.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree with what you two have said, especially in terms of it depends. If you have a company where you have an owner and then 10 employees, then you ought to be almost certainly working more closely with the owner than, say, the sales manager and the other 9 employees, as far as who you report to. But on the flip side, if you have a company that has a CEO and a whole bunch of VPs and a bunch of other executives, then you should be, I think, very closely aligned with the CEO. Certainly, you should be working with the VPs and have their buy-in and such. But I think it's who, in my opinion, holds either the most responsibility for the revenue and/or is responsible for the vision of the company. And that might be the same person, it might not be. But that would be my opinion.
Yep, true.
Shadab, before we wrap up, do you have any final tips or thoughts or opinions when it comes to QBRs, PRRs?
QBRs, thoughts, opinions. One big opinion: if you are not running them, run them. So, for example, it's not real, but for example, just in case, uh, if I were to leave rep partners today and join some other companies, the first thing I would do is hire rep partners specifically to do QBRs for me. Just for that, I would hire them. The reason I'm saying it, because um you need that pure ops perspective in QBRs. We don't want to sugarcoat anything in QBRs. We want to be like as transparent as much as possible. And because we, work closely, so intimately with the data and, the end user of the systems and tech, we can have like very direct and responsible opinions on stuff without thinking about the repercussions of talking about those stuff. If I'm a sales manager and I'm like running a QBR, um, there is a high chance that I might think about, hey, this particular salesperson had a bad performance. How can I put that report out? It's like a difficult situation. That's not the case in ops. You are like all just a bunch of numbers to us in a good sense. So yeah, if you're not doing QBRs, do them. If you need professional help, hire someone to do it for you and learn how to do it. uh, but do it. If you're already doing it, make sure you have a clear end state and you think about one. So think about it like this always: once this QBR is done, what needs to happen, like what I wish to happen. So have a clear end state, and then you think about all of your data structure, data points, whatever you're missing. Just also share that, hey, we are missing all of these things, we need to fix this in the next quarter. Don't hide it. So be as transparent, and also involve specific stakeholders within those. Involve those in your conversation. Even though you own all of that, you involve people. You involve your VP, you involve your sales manager, your CS manager, partner experience, anyone who is like applicable to that, and get like anecdotal insights on your reports. That's gonna add like a really really good perspective on stuff. So that would be my like 3 main opinions on this.
Very insightful stuff. The quarterly business review is truly a waypoint from quarter to quarter, and beginning your QBR with that end state in mind is what's going to make it successful, so that the output of your quarterly business review is the input and the buy-in with the executive team for what you're going to do going into the next quarter.
Yep.
Shadab, thank you for joining us today. Mark, always a pleasure when we get to do these Sprocket Pods. For those of you who are listening, make sure you tune in weekly on Fridays. And everyone, Sprocket on. Thank you for tuning into the SprocketPod podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode with your co-hosts, Cameron Collins and Mark Lerner. Be sure to catch us live every week on LinkedIn, and don't forget to subscribe to our episodes on YouTube and Spotify. If you found this episode valuable, please leave a review and share it with others looking to get more from HubSpot. Until next time, keep driving success with your CRM, and as always, Sprocket on.